Hey there, this is Jason Scott of archive.org. You're listening to the Scene World podcast, getting history over the air.
Sup, it's the Scene World podcast. You might be able to tell from my eyes that I haven't slept in a while, but that's okay, because I've been playing video games.
I see, hey.
In a minute, we're going to be talking to Kelsey Lewin.
Exactly. Co-director of the Game History Foundation.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. So,
yes.
But in a minute, as you said,
I'm going to squint through my 8 hours straight of No Man's Sky to.
Oh. Oh.
Not really. But gonna wake ourselves up and do some news. So I'm gonna start with my news really quick, just because it's kind of sad, and we'll start it off on a sad note. Yes.
Ooh.
John Galt, the original voice of Lo Wang. This comes from 3D Realms. The original voice of Lo Wang, John Galt, who was also the voice of Grandfather NEC in Prey, and did a lot of other voice work in games and did some acting and stuff. Passed away on January 29th.
Wow.
So that was posted to the Facebook page by his son, and 3D Realms reposted it on their Facebook page. So we'll put a link to where you can see what he did and all that. And cool guy. Did a lot of voice work, and a lot of voice work that you wouldn't have necessarily guessed by looking at him. But yeah. So that's my bit to start off with. Now we can lighten things up a little bit with
okay, should we stay at Apogee?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's now a different company, but anyways, they announced that they will be publishing Rise of the Triad remastered on PC and consoles in 2022.
Okay.
And Scott Miller and his Apogee company also received a 5 million funding for the new generation of indie titles. That's great.
Nice.
And we actually spoke to Scott Miller.
Yes, we did.
A few episodes ago, and one of the questions was, how do you go about the funding now that you are, well, working with the company again, you know? So
yeah,
there's the answer. He managed to get the funding.
Yes, he did.
Yes. Well, so at least there we have some positive news. And also news, as we spoke about releases, Sociable Soccer 2022 will be released this year. And, well, as some people might know or not, but Sean Hare announced Sociable Soccer a few years back. Then they had a failed Kickstarter.
Right.
Then they said they would release it on Steam anyway.
I remember that.
They released a beta. Then they removed it because they received funding to make the mobile game first. And now they are going backwards to the original plan and make a PC release.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
interesting.
It's going all back. Yeah.
Well, at least it's getting done. I mean, because that's, Sociable Soccer is the kind of successor to Sensible Soccer, which was a big hit on the Amiga. And, I remember you talking to him years ago at Gamescom. Yeah.
Exactly.
About it.
Yeah, and he mentioned that he totally hated the port on the PlayStation. That was totally horrible. But,
right.
He totally regretted to not be responsible for that himself. So anyway, now after all those years, it's finally continuing because, the retro nerds like us, we don't want mobile game versions.
Yes.
We want the real deal.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, so anyway, 2022 sounds to be promising, Well,
Yeah.
Rise of the Triad remastered, Sociable Soccer. Looks good. Looks really good. Well, the other news is that the deadline for the next issue, 111 of the German Discmag Digital Talk, the only Discmag left, by the way.
Excuse me.
is
Wait. The only Discmag left.
German.
The only
Discmag.
German Discmag left. Okay.
Yes.
I was gonna say because I happen to work
yeah.
for two different Discmags that are
Right,
still
but
in existence.
I said German.
Yes.
German.
Okay.
Anyway, so it's 111, and the deadline for this is the 22nd of February 2022 at 10:20 p.m.
Yeah, of course.
And they also got a new website. So more to that down there.
Very cool.
Yep. And we stick with the language. David Pleasance, who we interviewed before, for one of his books,
Yes.
he actually has now in query a poll, you would say, about his previous book, and that was Commodore: The Inside Story, and he asked the German retro nerds if they want to have the English book translated.
Oh.
So, more info on our Twitter. We will link to the tweet. Let him know if you want to have a German version.
Now, is that something that you would be interested? Like, you
No,
speak English pretty. You basically, you have almost native fluency in English. So.
Not really, but thank you.
But no. There really isn't. It's not like it's a difficult thing for you to understand or to communicate in English. So, in that instance, would you want a German translation of the book?
No, I don't need it. I think it's a waste of resources and better used somewhere else. But perhaps that is just me. I know many Germans prefer German over English, but a translation is a translation is a translation.
Yeah. Your Ninja Turtles theme was much better than ours, but
What?
The German Ninja Turtles theme was much better than the American Ninja Turtles
right,
theme. But
yeah,
aside
but
from
that has to do with the singer,
Frank Zander, yes.
And
but yeah, aside from that, like I always like to think that things I prefer things in their original, like even like a foreign movie, and I say foreign, but a movie not in English. I'd rather watch it in its native language with subtitles.
I hate subtitles. So
see, I hate dubbing. The dubbing throws me off because if the lips aren't moving with the speech, it's like I want to hear their voices the way that they actually spoke it. I don't want to hear some other guy doing the voice,
Yeah, but here's the thing: there are many series, that are on Netflix. For example, there are some Danish series, and the actors speak English and Danish.
Yes.
So it's the same voice, it's the same person. The lips are synced because they talk the way they talk. But the thing is that the thing that really threw me off at the first two episodes is the skill level of their English is so much different over the whole cast that some people had a very strong accent in Danish, their English, and others spoke fluently like they were from Great Britain or America. And this difference in English fluency and totally having an accent or not having an accent, that totally confused me. That totally like, wow, you know. So it would be like one person is having a thick Danish accent, and the other one sounds like he's not from Denmark, but indeed, that is what was done.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not only once. I noticed that with a couple of foreign series in Netflix that they just say, oh, well, they speak English anyway because countries like Denmark, they don't have a synchronization dubbing of movies, so they don't have this industry at all. Only for kids, for child movies, child series, because they have subtitles,
Right.
but nobody in Sweden, Norway, or Netherlands, or Denmark reads the subtitles.
Huh.
So that is why people have generally a very, very good fluency across all generations, young, old, doesn't matter, because that industry never existed. But
Right.
on the other hand, if you go and switch to English, you have to manage the vast difference of English skills. That's it.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about grammar or how much words they know. It's really it's the accent that's
Right.
throws me off. But
Right.
at some point, you got used to it. You don't hear it anymore. You know,
Right.
you hear through it.
Right. Yeah.
So that's an interesting concept. So I guess that's how Netflix says, like, why would we need to hire people to dub? Let's do it themselves.
Yeah, I know a lot of, like, I watch if you watch anything on Disney Plus, like the Loki series that was out, or the Mandalorian, or any of that stuff. The closing credits are like 20 minutes long because they have to have, like, the Spanish cast, and then the Italian cast, and the German cast, and the Japanese cast, and all the different the people that dubbed over. And it's just, I don't know, it's I don't know if they did the move, if they did the series in German natively, I would rather watch it in German and read the subtitles, because there's just, like, inflection in the voice that you don't get otherwise, and it's there's just, I'd rather hear the actual person than hear someone dub over it. That's just me. I'm weird.
So you like the idea of actors speaking the English versions themselves?
Yeah, if it works. I mean, as you just mentioned,
Works
it didn't.
perfect.
As you just mentioned, there's a bit of a disconnect between certain people that have different levels of fluency, and it can
when it comes to
disconnect
accent,
you from it.
Just
Right.
just like, wow. It's like, wow.
Right.
And then they did it a couple of times. For example, there is the series Into the Sun, and now this series is from Belgium.
Okay.
Belgium has a German part, a French part, and a Dutch part. So that means the actors in English have French, have Dutch, or German accent. And you can exactly see from which region of the country they are coming from.
Yeah, right. I like the way that they like the Japanese studios did with, like, the old Godzilla movies, where you'd have some American actors, you'd have some Japanese actors, and they just spoke English or Japanese, and, like, there was no, like, they didn't even try to like make it all one thing. It was, they spoke Japanese or subtitles, and then this guy just speaks English. It surprised me the first time I saw it, because I was like, wait a minute, like, what? Because I'm watching and I'm reading subtitles, or I'm however it works, and then suddenly just some Italian dude is just standing there talking English, and it's like he's having a conversation where they're speaking Japanese and he's speaking English, and it's like, okay, that's a little bit weird, but I kind of like it. I kind of dig that.
Well, I mean, it's just interesting because you can clearly see Netflix is only investing money where it's necessary.
Yeah.
And in a normal TV series, nobody would dare to do that. Everything has to sound accent free and perfect and over the top. And
Yeah, right.
Netflix is like, we don't give a shit.
Yeah.
We do it our way.
Right.
And I had all that you mentioned. They were genuine, and they would talk in English as they would talk in Danish. So there was not really a big of difference, I guess.
Right.
Anyway,
getting back to things, we're talking way off topic.
Not only talking about languages.
Yes.
Okay, so
hola means hello.
So last bit I have is Sega sells all remaining shares in their arcades and exits the arcade business. And that's
Sega is leaving the arcade business.
Yeah, and they blame Corona for that, of course.
Well, yeah, I could see. Okay, so I could see them. Well, Sega is like that. They're one of the main. They've always been one of the main arcade. Okay, so
next to Capcom,
right? But all right, so I might be a little bit off in this, but when I think of Sega in the arcade, I think of like Afterburner and stuff like that, which is old. I haven't been in an arcade in probably 25 years. So, and that's really dating me here, but
that's not true. We went to arcades when I was there in 2009.
Yes, that's
a lot. Basically
yeah.
daily for 10 days.
Yeah,
because I forced you to.
Yeah, down at the boardwalk. Yeah.
Wherever we saw an arcade, I was like, yeah, I want to go in there. That's totally.
Yeah.
And you were thinking like, oh my God, not again.
Yeah. Well. Either way, that was still, that was 10, a little over 10 years ago. So I mean, that's
13.
Yeah, 13 years ago. So that's the last time I set foot, and it was still at the time. It was cruising USA, cruising world, stuff like that. It was 16-bit type games. Like that's where my brain like did the arcade industry like continue on to where like there were higher level games, or did they stay there?
I made for the podcast an interview about Sonic Mania in 2017, and I was in Japan, in Tokyo, the same year. They just, for the arcade version, they just do the PC version in our arcade cabinet.
Okay.
And all those arcade machines would all be connected to the internet, and would update via firmware over internet.
Okay.
To new revisions of the game.
Okay.
So it went from dedicated boards more to a PC driven arcade. And I was in an arcade in 2012, so 3 years later, in Brazil, and I was playing Street Fighter 2, and was like, the timing is a bit off. The colors are not as I'm used to. And then I saw how a technician repaired another arcade machine, and he opened the gasket, and it was a PC inside running MAME.
Right. That's the yeah, like I said, my brain still thinks of arcades as like that 16-bit era thing, and
like
again, I haven't.
Behind me.
Yeah, exactly. And even when I've gone to these the conventions like a video game con, where they have where they set up an arcade room like the free arcade, it is still those 8-bit and 16-bit games, and with an occasional like you're I don't know what it is, the thing you dance on, and you
Dance Revolution.
There you go. That could be it. Yeah, a couple of those things, which I guess are modern games, but most of it is 16-bit.
You mean the games with those sensor mats?
Yes.
To step on?
Yeah, people.
Yeah,
If you're watching the video version of this podcast, you're probably watching that right now because I got video of it from the last time I was at a video game show. So,
ooh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
We actually spoke about this topic twice. Once with Richard Knuckles,
yeah,
who is also nicknamed the King of the Arcades.
Right,
There
right.
was a movie, that name, in 2011. And we spoke about that a few years before with Rainer Grabhol and Sinat Palic from the Foremost Only Pinball and Arcade Museum.
right.
So, just if you want to coin on that topic, there you can go back to
Yes.
the old episodes. I suggest watching the video version, but as you please. Anyway.
Yes. So yeah, okay. That was just my thing. I wasn't sure if Sega stepping out. I wasn't sure what their contribution has been over the last 10 years or so, because again my brain thinks of Afterburner or stuff like that, or Street Fighter 2 and stuff, that kind of level of game. So Sega stepping out of the arcade business, does that really impact the arcade business that much?
Here's the thing. The article says they are not really closing down. They, as I said, sold. So it's sold to Gigo arcades.
Right.
And
Okay. Yeah.
so that means all the remaining Sega arcades will stay in business, but rethemed to Gigo arcades. That means there's a shift in the ownership of the arcade, but the arcades are not closing.
Okay.
And Gigo stands for Get Into the Gaming Oasis.
Okay. Sure.
So that's a good thing. That means they are not really closing down. They are just having a new owner.
Right. Not that any arcades are really open because, again, coronavirus, and we're year 3 now of this, and
unfortunately. Anyway,
Yeah.
So the good news is, because we spoke about the death of the museums,
and we spoke to people who were dealing with that, like Leland Heller and from the Maid, and
exactly
the guys at not for
the Digital Retro Park.
There you go, Digital Retro Park, who actually did they released a museum tour on the Game Boy. I mean, that's
we mentioned that a couple of times.
Yeah. It seems in Europe, the museums and the stuff like that does far better than in the U.S. where.
Not really. The problem is many machines are in a very, very poor shape. We don't have somebody like Richie Knuckles. We don't have people who repair screens, CRTs. So our machines are in a worse shape than those in USA, because we miss people like.
Well, your machines might be in worse shape, but you have generally you don't get booted out when you miss rent for the first week.
That's not true. The games EV. The other club from Karlsruhe actually got booted out and had to move location.
Oh, okay.
Due to the pandemic, so they had to move out. Yeah.
That's rough, man.
Yeah. So it even happened to them. Yeah.
That is rough.
Let's see if I can find. I think they are called retro games. Yep, here we go. Retro Games Karlsruhe. There they are. Exactly. And they had this issue themselves, actually. Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
But they found a new place. They actually found a new place in September last year.
Okay.
Yup. And before that, they were, well, collecting donations.
Yeah.
So that's basically it. That means I will have to send you the link here. So you can put that in the news list.
I will put that in the news list. Bloop.
Bloop. Yeah. Well, so do you have any other news, or
I
should
don't
we go
have.
to our guest?
I think we've babbled enough about stuff. I think that we should go and talk to Kelsey and see what she has to say about stuff, especially like the Amico. I would like to know. I would like to talk about the Amico, and for anyone who has noticed that I keep looking down and doing things, that's because this gentleman has not wanted to eat his breakfast. He's got a sour tummy today.
And very important, if you watch this video version with the dog, please leave a like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you get notified about new videos on our YouTube channels, because that's very important.
Mm-hmm.
The more reach we get, the better as guests we can get.
Yes, and if you're listening to the audio version, also, leave us a review on Stitcher or iTunes or wherever it is that you're listening to us on, because it helps. But anyway, so... But there's an incentive, because here's my dog, and if you're listening to this, you can't hear this very well, although maybe he'll make a noise. Can you make a snortle? He's not going to snortle. No, he's just going to be quiet.
It's not doing that on command.
No, he's not.
Bad dog.
Nah, he's not. He's not a loud dog. He's very chill. Oh, there he goes. There you go. That's all you got at him is a.
That sounded like Pleo, this robot dinosaur.
Yes, exactly.
From Caleb Chung, who also invented Furby.
Well, he kind of looks like a Furby.
True. But he doesn't have the ears.
He's not as creepy as Furby. Anyway, Kelsey Lewin, that way. Or right, actually, it's going to be straight ahead, honestly.
Boop, boop, boop,
yeah,
boop,
beep, boop, boop.
boop, boop.
There we go.
Bye.
Pachoo.
Yeah. So today we have another podcast episode with another guest, and this time is Kelsey Lewin. Hello, Kelsey.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being here. And with us for the first time, actually, is our member Frank as a co-moderator, and AJ, of course, and I'm Joerg. So, and we are basically talking today to you, Kelsey, about the Game History Foundation. That's actually what I inquired.
Yeah.
So, but basically, I would say let's start with our common question that we ask our guests, like, how did you get involved into computers and stuff?
Into computers in general, or
Yes.
video game? Okay.
Yeah, gaming and whatnot.
I mean, I had a computer basically as far back as I remember, which, my dad used one for work, so I was kind of playing around on it and figuring out what the internet was pretty early on. And my first console was an original Game Boy, which was also my dad's. He didn't use it very much, but we had baseball for the Game Boy, we had Tetris, and Super Mario Land, and that's where I began. And I've been into it ever since, but took me until my 20s to realize you could actually have a career in video games. I guess I never really thought about it enough to understand that these didn't just pop out of the ether fully formed, that there were actual people making these video games and that you could be involved in it.
So when was that, 7 years ago, 10 years ago? Because I remember the first time you came into the picture for me was 7 years ago, 2015.
I have been, well, let's see, in college, when I first moved to Seattle, Washington, which is where I am right now, I got a job at a video game store, which I now own. And that was about 10 years ago now. And I would say that that's probably my intro into games as a business. I mean, it's different working at a video game store than being involved in other parts of the industry, but that's when I started being interested in video games at sort of a deeper level than just playing them for fun and it being a hobby. I got interested in learning about what went into making the video games, what was going on behind the scenes, some of the more weird and interesting kind of stuff that I couldn't find easy answers for. So like the first time we had a Super Nintendo game called Packy and Marlon that is a game it's a platforming game about two elephants who have diabetes, and you learn about diabetes while you play this game. And I was like,
Ahead of its time.
Yeah, totally. And I was curious about like, why was this game made, and started looking into it. And there wasn't really very much info on it. It was mostly just people kind of making fun of edutainment in general. That was sort of my introduction into like, hey, there's not a lot of really good introspective video game history out there yet, at least not for some of the more niche things. People have been talking about the history of Mario forever, but anything a little bit more out there, people were just kind of like, yeah, that's a bad game. Who cares?
Yeah, Pink Gorillas, it's actually called.
Yes, yeah, my game stores are called Pink Gorilla Games. We've got 2 locations in Seattle, Washington. So.
And I actually saw in another interview, you actually took it with another coworker from its pre-owner.
Yeah, so my partner and I purchased the business from our former boss, and that was almost 6 years ago now. Yeah, so we've been running it for about 6 years now, and I love it. We were managers there before, but so we were doing a lot of the day-to-day running of it anyways. But
it was just the next gradual step up.
Yes, exactly. I'm sorry, we had a
no problem.
Very loud motorcycle just go by.
No problem. It's not live, so it's all good.
Okay, great.
Yeah, well, the thing is, you mentioned earlier that you didn't know until fairly recent that you could make a business out of it, and well, you also mentioned that you are not much of a Commodore person, but basically what we do here in the podcast, at least, we don't concentrate on Commodore 64 only, despite we spun as a Commodore 64 disc magazine, so
right,
we are pretty much mixed. But it's interesting that you mentioned that because I remember 20 years ago when I had this idea and started all that people told me I'm too young to know about retro, and now that you are, well, I guess around 27 or something.
Yeah.
You don't you have the same feedback sometimes, or
Oh,
is
absolutely.
that not a thing nowadays?
Yeah, absolutely. I think most people are starting to understand now that you can be interested in something that was a little before your time. But I occasionally have people who are at the very least surprised that a lot of my interests lie in stuff that was popular before I was born or when I was too young to really be using it. But yeah, definitely did not grow up with a Commodore. There's some games with very good names on the Commodore 64. That's about all I can say. Like Arg Condor is probably the best video game name I've ever heard in my life. More video games should be named things like that.
Yeah. That's actually interesting.
Yeah, we do have some good, Nobby the Aardvark and
yes.
God, yeah, there's some good ones.
There's a game about like raccoons trying to shut down your bakery or something. What's that called?
Comic Bakery?
Comic Bakery. Yeah.
Comic Bakery.
I guess I'm basic here. I just know Gianna Sisters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But actually many games, especially Comic Bakery, weren't really famous for their gameplay, but for their music. Mm-hmm. You had people like Martin Galway, Rob Hubbard, who would also make music on other platforms like NAS, or even PC Speaker. That was a thing back then, but for some reason, C64 and later on Amiga was where they shined for some reason. But that's interesting because that's hoovering us into the game history, the video game history foundation. So you are concentrating now since 4 years and 10 months. It says being a co-director of that.
Oh, is that from my LinkedIn? I was like,
Yes.
how did you get that amount of time? Yeah, I joined in a capacity that had a name, I guess. Almost 5 years ago now. Started as just a very enthusiastic volunteer that basically wouldn't stop trying to help, and eventually, was given more and more responsibilities until it just made sense for me to become the co-director. I've only been full-time for not that long yet. It was, September of last year, I believe, when I started full-time. And yeah, now this is my full-time thing now. I concentrate on it most days out of the week, and then just kind of check in on the stores. Luckily, they run themselves without me pretty well now. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if you want me to just start giving the spiel about what we are, or if you just want to ask questions.
Go for it.
Sure.
Oh, cool. Yeah, so we're a 501c3 nonprofit. So our basic mission is that we want to teach and celebrate and preserve video game history. And what that means on a more practical level is there's not a lot more people are interested in video game history now, but it's still really, really difficult to actually study video game history. The primary sources for it are almost non-existent. I mean, if you want to tell the history of Mario, you don't have access to, any of. There's not like original design documents that you can just easily reference. They've shared a little bit of stuff. Obviously Miyamoto's given some interviews, but it's all very scattered. And you only get so much by the ability to continue to play the game. I mean, we have an amazing community of emulators and that sort of thing that keep the ability to play these games around, which is obviously a very big part of it. But the part that we don't really have yet is the ability to study them beyond that. So if you wanted to dig around in the code of some of your favorite games, that's almost never possible. If you wanted to, read design notes about any of your favorite games, that's usually impossible. Sometimes people have given interviews. Sometimes they're still alive and around for interviews. Sometimes they're not. And so what we exist to do is to make all of that easier. So we're an archive. We're based out of Oakland, California, and we collect all of these things. We preserve them. We find them. We talk to people who've been in the industry for a long time. Most people, for a lot of people, especially going back to the 80s and 90s, this is kind of just a job for them, and it's not like they were keeping really meticulous hard drive backups of all of their work and treating it as this thing that would go on to be a very culturally important thing. And even in a lot of cases, if they thought it was culturally important, it's like, yeah, but that's like, what Miyamoto's doing is culturally important, not what I'm doing. So it's been a lot of trying to get people who have been in the industry more involved, get people who are currently in the industry more involved, thinking about how they are impacting the entire course of history and of culture and stuff by the work that they're doing. And we've had a really good amount of success out of it. I mean, I do feel like we're sort of picking up crumbs in some ways because so much of things have been lost. Luckily, not so much the games themselves. Most things that were sold on like a retail cartridge or disc or something are, tend to be safe to, like, you can still find and play most things. That's obviously becoming harder now in the current state of the world. But, with digital downloads and servers needing to be online and that sort of thing. But at least going back, all of that seems to be okay. But everything else is a struggle. So we've been able to rebuild some old builds of games from hard drive backups people have kept. We've been able to capture some of the tools that were used to build some of these games, art, scripts. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot of very random stuff. Paperwork. Sometimes people keep paperwork of like press releases, not just what we do collect things like video game magazines, but it's not just the magazines that are important to us, but also like what was sent to the magazines. So anyways, that is a very rambly, long overview of the kind of stuff that we do, but feel free to ask further questions for clarification.
Of course, I have a lot in my mind. Actually, I can contribute to that. 24 years ago. So when I was 16, I made a call to...
I was just going to bring this up. I was just going to say...
I made a call to Vienna in Austria, and I spoke to the coder of Legends of Kirill, and I got the source discs around 20, and I was told the game is 80% finished for the Commodore 64. Was supposed to be in English and German, but I didn't find anybody yet who would dig into the discs and finish the game. So I sent it to a lot of, cracker groups, publishers, individual coders, but nobody actually digged into the discs and gave me feedback. So it's a lost game that nobody wants to finish and even look at it, and that's so sad for me, because back in those days it was an expensive phone call, and my mom was screaming on me when she saw the phone bill. But I'm really feeling very sorry that at some point there is nobody who would say, okay, send it to me, I will look at it and I will see to complete it. And it even projects who are mainly for that, even they say no if it's too much work or if it's 20 discs. Well, it's a real-time strategy game, so that's a lot of things. So anyway, if you know somebody who is willing to feedback, I can send you the email. I have all the disc images.
She does.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I feel like with video game history, especially when it comes to stuff like that, I mean, you're asking someone to finish the game. That's a hard sell. I would think that it would have to be you have to find someone who's very already knowledgeable about this, dying tech format, right? This already this
assembler coding.
I almost feel like you should look into like the homebrew community for that. Like maybe some homebrew developer would want to take it on and finish it, because that's been done before.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but my point was really just that, like, in the world of video game history, things tend to only get done if there's someone really keenly interested about that exact thing, because so much of this requires so much work. So even for us, I mean, this is our not to finish games, but our job is to preserve these things and keep them safe and in a spot for people to access and stuff. That would be it's tough for us to what is the right word? We definitely intake source, and that's an enormous part of what we do. I think source code is incredibly important, but you are demonstrating an event or a thing that happened where you had the source and just no one cared to look at it, and that happens sometimes. Unfortunately, we have some stuff that is like, if there's the right person who really wants to study this, we've got the gold mine for them, but it's sort of like still in search of whoever that right person is who wants to tell that history and wants to really dig in.
Right,
you're more have a passion for it. It's got to be like a passion project.
Yeah, you're more in the archiving the material and making it available to people. If they want to finish it, they can.
Right,
they can find where it is.
Exactly, and I mean we do sometimes make some content out of the stuff that comes through our archive, but it's more in a we call it like proving the market. Basically, it's like, here, look what you can do if you have access to this source. Like, look at the kinds of things you can discover, so that hopefully other historians or journalists or fans even see that and are like, oh, that's something that would be interesting to explore. I didn't realize I would be able to get all of this from that resource.
I wonder, do you have cooperations with other museums around the world doing the same thing? For example, some years ago, we spoke to the Bolo Museum in the French part of Switzerland. They are doing basically the same you are telling us right now.
They're compiling like source and archiving that
Exactly.
sort of thing. That's
yes,
great.
and keeping
That's awesome.
history and stuff. So I think there should be an effort, somebody coordinating it and making it global, and not every country for itself. At least that's my opinion. I don't know what you think about it.
Absolutely, ideally, that would be the case. You know, I certainly don't feel like the Video Game History Foundation is capable of archiving absolutely everything in the entire world. We're just, I mean, in general, I think that we call it an ecosystem. Like, there needs to be many players in it because there's too much to do for any one organization or one group of people or one person to handle it all. And ideally, there's a more connected network of all of the global organizations. But I think we're all still kind of in the weeds here, figuring out what each of our own territories needs. And that organization is just, it just kind of hasn't happened yet. But I think if you spoke to any of them, they would all agree, like, yes, we should all be working together. We should all be in contact more. I mean, we're
part of it is it's kind of just like in the infancy stages right now. Like, if you look at like movie preservation or like with paintings, like those have been around for way longer than video games. Video games is still, it's weird to say, but it's still a new medium.
That is exactly it.
Yeah,
I mean,
and it was only just recently in parts of Europe where it was designated something like something of cultural significance.
That was actually also 2015 because AJ and I, we were part of the exhibit.
You were?
Yes, in Frankfurt, in the Frankfurt Film Museum.
Yes. We kept talking. We weren't the exhibit.
Exactly, we were we were doing evening programs on Twitch.
Not that old.
Yeah, right. But so even in Europe, it just started like seven years ago, basically. But I see you also got our last guest, for example, Simon Carlos is also a board member of your foundation, right?
Yeah, I didn't know you had Simon on. That's awesome.
Yeah, he was the last guest.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, we love Simon. Simon is one of our executive board members. He also runs our social media, which is huge. It's a godsend that I don't have to be doing that. And you know, helps out a lot in the office as well. So you know, I mean, I don't want to restate anything Simon has already said, but you know, he was in the industry and is still in the industry for a really long time. He is a fantastic member of our executive board team and keeps us in line. I mean, that's what an executive board exists for in the nonprofit world, is people to make sure that you're staying on track with your mission and not doing, you know, not falling off into doing unrelated activities too much. So he is excellent. And just to circle back to the beginning of your question, which was other organizations in the US, there are some other ones. You know, we're an archive and not a museum, so we don't really have the sort of focus on display pieces. We have a few because occasionally we do pop-up exhibits, just because they're a good way to kind of get the public engaged and educated and stuff. But you know, we don't have like a permanent exhibit space, but we do work with some of the other organizations in the US. I would say the biggest one here is the Strong Museum of Play, which is in Rochester, New York, upstate New York. They you know, they're not strictly a video game museum, but they are actually building an entire wing for their video game stuff now because it's starting to outgrow the rest of the museum. And they also have a fantastic archive of magazines. They have the Jordan Mechner collection, so all of his. He actually did save everything. That's a guy who. I don't know if he understood that he was making history, but he certainly saved all of his stuff like he understood that he was making history. So they've got like all of his notebooks and photos of his brother that he took when he was rotoscoping Prince of Persia and that sort of thing. It's fantastic.
He actually wrote to our PR person today, like 3 hours ago, that he would be like being a guest next year. So
oh, great! Yeah.
So he will probably be a podcast guest as well. But he said he would like to take a few more months to work on stuff he's doing currently. So and speaking about Simon Carlos, were we not? We only spoke to him exclusively about net labels. So and even that we spent 2 hours only talking about net labels. So we were like, okay, we are not talking about your video game history as well, because for this now we have you. So that's
makes sense.
Actually, yeah. So don't worry that you're repeating something our listeners didn't hear yet, because that's not the case.
Okay.
Yeah, but it just happened to be this way. Anyway, if you need any connections or anything, you can always ask me. I know the people mostly from other museums, at least in Switzerland. And in Germany, I'm actually a member of the Arcade and Pinball Museum in Seligenstadt, and we only have 2 in whole Germany. So
we've also got, there's the Maid in the U.S. and whatnot. We've got contacts there that we can.
Yeah,
exactly.
We know.
So
we know
if you need to grow your network, we know who to contact. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, we definitely want to work as much with other organizations as we can and as makes sense. It's just I think when you talk to those other organizations as well, they'll probably say the same thing, like, yes, absolutely, in theory, when that comes up. And
just about coordination.
Yes.
Number one thing people are surprised of is mostly like, you're doing this for 22 years? You're sticking so long with old tech? Why?
Yeah.
Most
Got a passion.
projects don't survive that long because the team splits up or daily life issues, whatever. But the core team, and AJ is one of them, we stuck together for 22 years now. So talking about history, a lot of people that we interviewed basically aren't around anymore, which is kind of sad, And so
who was it that you talked to? That was
Ralph Baer.
Yeah,
Ralph Baer, the inventor of home video game consoles. And I did the last interview when he was 91, and a few months later, when he turned 92, he died. So I was the one doing the final and longest interview.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't know that at this time,
You were his last interview.
Exactly.
I mean, yeah, obviously he's a big one to lose. I will say, thankfully, he's someone who absolutely understood his place in history and talked a lot. So we have a lot of Ralph Baer interview out there, which is great. Yeah, video games are starting to become. They're just turning old enough now that we're actually starting to lose people. Which when you think about it, like you were saying, Frank, I mean, this is still a really young industry. The fact that we're kind of just now starting to lose people to old age. Pioneers from
I still kind of go
beginning.
back to Gunpei Yokoi with the creator of the Game Boy, the Wonder Swan, the Virtual Boy.
Yeah. I mean,
we lost him early on.
Yeah, he died very young. But yeah, and the Japanese side is so tough. He did help write. There's a biography on him done in Japan. It's never gotten an English translation. It got a French translation. And that at least has a lot of, like, he was able to get down many of the stories of kind of early Nintendo, which is
that's cool.
Which is really nice because I mean that I don't think it wasn't out yet before he died, if I recall correctly. So like people didn't even really know that we had that until after he passed away.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So but I mean the Japanese side in general is frustrating. We've already lost several very key players of the video game, especially the console video game industry. And a lot of them have done interviews. Many of them haven't been translated. Nintendo especially is obviously a particularly tight-lipped company. And that is a frustrating thing for a historian, because there's so many of these stories that, we don't have the complete picture on, and I don't really know that we will before it's too late. We were really happy. I mean, this is on the US side of Nintendo, but we were really excited that last month we were able to get some of the original editors of Nintendo Power together. They've all long since retired now, and we're finally, able to kind of speak at least somewhat off the cuff of their time at Nintendo, and tell some of those early stories. But anyone who's still employed, I mean, Nintendo still has one of their earliest employees there, even at Nintendo of America. His name is Don James. He was like one of the first 5 or 10 employees at Nintendo of America, and he is still there today. And that's someone who I'm sure has, just some incredible stories to share, but because he's still at the company, it's it's difficult. It can be very difficult for them to get the ability to share some of those stories. I mean, even myself personally, there was a project I was working on, and spoke to a couple of Nintendo employees at E3 and was like, hey, would you be willing to speak on this project? And they were like, yes, in theory. I have to ask my boss. And then, of course, it comes back and no, I can't talk about that. So
we had that same experience. We spoke to Charles Martinet, who was just the voice actor for Mario. And he
had to go through hoops.
we had to submit the podcast to Nintendo, I believe, right?
No, it wasn't Nintendo. That was Konami. With Nintendo, I had to call to a manager of a Japanese event in Denmark to make time for the interview.
I thought there was still something he had to check with first before we
got
of
course he had to ask in Nintendo for permission, but the thing is, he knew us already because he did an interview before with our webmaster at that time for his own Nintendo publication. So they already knew who we are, so getting a yes was kind of easy. But the situation AJ remembers was Konami. They were pretty picky about what you would be able to release. But during those interviews, you always have like super interesting moments that you didn't expect to happen, and especially in your case, Kelsey, you wrote me, your first reaction was like, I'm super busy, I'm not sure when we can talk. And then I kept asking till you finally said, okay, I can make the time. So I totally understand that for you and other people, it's a matter of taking the time, and for the records, an audio.
Probably her tone of voice is probably more like, all right.
Finally.
Well, it's it's just one of those things that's tough for us as a small organization. I mean, video game history, video games in general are a young industry. History of video games is an even younger industry, and we only started paying staff at all last year, after 5 or 6 years of the foundation being around, because it's just that's what it takes to do this work. Is there's not money in it, and you have to kind of slowly build support for it. So we are there's 3 of us now, which is fantastic, 3 full-time people, and I'm super happy about that. But even still, it's tough to take time away from the work sometimes, because it's like there's only 3 of us and there's a lot to do. But I'm happy to be here.
Isn't that kind of a hobby rather than work? I mean, isn't that if you do something you like, it doesn't really feel like work anymore, or does it?
That's always the goal, yeah.
That is a very wonderful thought, yeah. I mean, the reality of it is just that when I'm doing the actual work, yeah, it's fantastic. But the other side of it is that it's also a nonprofit that has to be run and has to be sustainable. So sometimes that's, things like talking to donors and fundraising and nonprofit compliance and all of the less attractive parts of the job. And also, I mean, I absolutely love what I do, but I don't know, like the day-to-day can sometimes be not the most exciting work. I mean, we're talking about we took a trip to Chicago last year, where we went to a former developer's house and we're helping him digitize all of his stuff. And for like 11 hours straight, I just ripped discs, and like that's not really exciting. Like just
Not the
put
most
disk
thrilling
in
thing.
computer,
Oh,
make
yeah, yeah.
ISO, take photo of disk, put them in a folder. Like it's not always super sexy work, but but it's important. So
Yeah.
For this kind of job, you have archive.org. They are doing it on a bigger scale.
well, yeah, but Jason Scott is also just one man, so
Yeah.
someone's got to actually do the disk ripping, and
Yeah.
it can't all be Jason Scott, unfortunately.
Yeah, he is like a machine. He does a lot
He is,
for
yeah.
one person. Yeah.
He is
Dedication.
an absolute machine. That is totally accurate.
So you know him as well. You
Oh,
spoke
yeah.
to him as well. Ah, okay. See. Uh, Basically, what I was amazed about you is, I mean, you are not really active on YouTube anymore so much lately, and that's really something that I find a pity. For example, your video about Nintendo sewing machines and how you go into details. That's amazing.
Nintendo's what machines?
Sewing machines.
Sewing
The Game
machine.
Boy?
So-
The
oh,
Game
Yeah,
Boy
Game Boy
sewing
sewing
machine?
machine.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I started out as I kind of alluded to earlier, I started to get interested in sort of the weirder side of video game history. Saw it wasn't really being covered well, which I didn't, I eventually figured out was because it's really, really hard to actually study these things. It's not I don't think it's just that people wanted to make fun of the Game Boy sewing machine rather than do serious research. I think it's really hard to do serious research on that kind of thing. I mean, it's not like the press releases still exist for that. It's not, it wasn't easy to figure out like who was involved, who can I talk to. And this concept was, it was created in Japan first and then licensed to the Singer, the sewing manufacturer. So there was no one in Japan I could contact because I don't speak Japanese, and it's much more difficult to find, accreditations and that sort of thing for Japanese people. So I did a lot of research on that one. It took me forever. I'm pretty. I think I did a pretty good job of what I was able to cover given the resources. But that was sort of, when I was working on YouTube videos, trying to tell these interesting histories, that was me sort of becoming a really frustrated historian. I was like, why is it so freaking hard to study these things? Why am I having to spend, 40 to 80 hours just on the research phase of this video and also not even getting all of the things I would like to say? I mean, in some cases I was able to talk to people involved with products, like when I talked about the Gluco Boy, which is a Game Boy Advance blood glucose monitor device, which is a fascinating little system. It's actually able to talk to several people involved with that project, but sometimes, especially when it comes out of Japan first, it's, finding those people and then especially talking to them is really difficult. And also, to tell the story of something, ideally, because we're in an industry that's starting to age, the hope is that you don't necessarily have to track down and conduct 5 brand new interviews, right? Like that there's already enough information out there, or that they've already given it a couple interviews, that you can at least tell a pretty good story without having to do all of that work. So that was really how I came to be involved with the foundation. Was I was so frustrated with how difficult it was to do good research. I mean, you know, I could recite the Wikipedia page and go a little bit deeper than that, and that wouldn't take too long. But that's not what I was interested in. You know, I was like, there's got to be more to it than this.
True.
Yeah, the
And I was
deep cuts.
frustrated. Exactly, and I was frustrated with how difficult that was. And then I saw the Video Game History Foundation launch, and you know, listened to the pitch, and was like, okay, this is someone who gets it. This is, you know, I think video game museums are also very important and serve their place, but like that's not what my frustration was with. My frustration was with how difficult it was to tell these stories. And so I really wanted to get involved and really wanted to help. And because of that, I now have basically no time for making YouTube videos.
I see that is why. Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is, it really depends on what you want. I mean, I always, when I want to convince people to speak in our podcast, number one issue is probably mostly people don't believe their English skills are good enough. That's really our number one issue, really. And then we tell people, well, we cut this anyway. It's not a one take. It's not live, so don't worry about it. And then sometimes it takes like 5, 6, 10 years to get to people because people have no emails or they have a phone number and never pick up. You know, and well, that's basically my experience. So my frustration is not getting info, but getting people convinced to talk. You know.
Yeah.
And the number two reason is it's so long ago I don't remember much.
Yeah. And I mean, two things I'll say to that. I mean, I think it's always difficult to it can sometimes be difficult to convince people to speak on the record about anything. I think a podcast format can probably make it even more difficult because a lot of times, like, especially if I've talked to former Nintendo people, it's always with the caveat, you know, with the exception of this event that we just did, it's always like, look, this is an interview between you and me. I won't publish anything. Like, I won't just publish this whole interview. I'm going to take pieces from it. I'm just recording you so that I have your words right, you know? And that's the kind of thing, like for some people, that's the limit of what they're comfortable with is like, I will talk to you, but I don't want the whole world to know. But if you want to tell this story, like I'll provide context for that story for you, but I don't want to be like the one in the spotlight for it. And that is just a comfort level with some people, which is unfortunate.
It's understandable though.
Yeah. And then the other thing that you were saying is, you know, oh, this was, you know, 20, 30 years ago for me. I don't remember. And I can absolutely relate to that. There's a lot of people who are like, I just don't know how accurate I'm going to be. I don't know how much of this I'm going to even remember. And trying to convince people like, look, it's okay. I know that it was 30 years ago for you. I know that you're not going to remember everything. You know, we'll do our best, and you're welcome to just say I don't know to anything. I mean, yeah, that is absolutely a hurdle sometimes. I got a great tip from Danny O'Dwyer, if you guys are familiar with the No Clip series of documentaries, who interviews people all the time for this kind of reason. And you know, I asked him because it comes up for me too. I was like, how do you get people, you know, in the headspace of 30 years ago? And what he says is he tries to get them talking about, you know, some of the more mundane stuff. So he'll be like, okay, so, you know, you're at Rare. You're at the studios of Rare, and it's like the mid 90s. Where were you going to eat for lunch? You know, tell me about the office. Like, what was the office architecture like? And then for some reason, he says that kind of just, it sort of puts their brain back in that time period, and then they're a little bit better at recalling some details because now they're thinking about like the day to day and the
getting back in the routine.
Yeah, rather than being like, tell me about Perfect Dark, go. You know,
that's a good hint. That's a good
hint. I think it's an awesome tip, so that's why I'm spreading it here too.
Wow,
good to know.
Write that down, Joerg.
Yeah.
Well, nowadays we have our PR helper, and he's pretty good in convincing people. I just threw him all the hopeless cases from the last 7 years, and he got already replies like, yeah, we can do it. I'm like, man, I didn't get any reply, and she's like, yeah, sure. I'm like, okay, you know. So
Well, he'll have to teach me some of his tricks because
yeah.
persistence is one of them, which you've got. So
Yeah.
most people ask once, and I'll be honest, unless it's someone I'm already super familiar with and already like, totally excited about, like sometimes the first email just kind of drifts away from my inbox and now it's on page 3 and I didn't really look at it. So persistence is a huge thing, and that's not just for people like me. That's also for when you're trying to get a hold of old developers and that sort of thing. I would say good 50% of the time they don't respond to contact attempt number 1, but they will respond to contact attempt number 2.
You know what?
Which is why Joerg handles it, because when I send an invitation and I get a no, I just go, okay, I leave.
Here's tip from me. When you can find somebody's phone number, use it and call that person.
Oh God.
Really. And the first question is, are you really calling from Germany? And I'm like, why do you think we are talking in English right now? Like, okay, good point. And then we just go with it, you know. It really, for example, when we wanted to do the interview with Tectoy, it took me 7 years to finally get somebody, because all my Brazilian friends told me nobody in Brazil speaks English, forget about it. And I was like,
that's not true.
But they did Sega Mega Drives and Master Systems, and they had contacts to Japan, and the Japanese probably don't speak Portuguese, though there must be a common language. And ta-da! The founder and chairman of back then, he speaks fluent English, so it was just a matter of finding his email address. You know, sometimes it's easy as that, you know. Right. And I mean, the thing is, well, let's be honest. If you can't convince people to talk to you, then their story is lost, because there's nobody else who can talk about certain things. For example, inventors who invented something and who had the grand idea, you know, there's nobody else who can tell the story in the same
get that
way.
Info from the source.
Exactly. And that is why many people at interviews are 88 or in their 90s or something.
Yeah,
which is quite a feat to be able to get people in their 80s and 90s to speak to you, because that's tough. I think even like memory and stuff aside, it's just the idea of kind of going on public record and talking at that point, I think is scary for a lot of people. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's like, no, I better do this now before I forget everything.
Yeah, I mean, of course you can't approach somebody and say, I know you are ATA, so let's do it now, or else you are not around anymore. And there's probably not a good way to approach people.
No.
So I totally understand. But I mean, you're not alone. I saw the Ron Gilbert interview from Frank, who is the other co-director, right?
Yes.
And he did a marvelous job there with this.
Yeah. So Frank Cifaldi, who's the founder and the other director, I mean, that interview went especially well for a number of reasons, but the most important of which, as we talked about earlier, is that that's like one of his favorite games of all time. So you have to have a passion for this stuff to, want to dig super, super hard into it. Frank learned Scum, the like programming language of LucasArts, to do that interview. He taught himself how to program in Scum, so that when he was talking with Ron Gilbert about Secret of Monkey Island and going through the source that we had access to, he was able to actually, program new things into the game and build it. I mean, it wasn't anything big. It was mostly like text changes and like make this character walk over here instead of over there. But it was still like, and he was able to implement, cut content back into the game, which again, I mean, all of that stuff is as a historian, like a really, really cool thing to be able to show, to be able to talk about, to be able to better understand, because you may see like the art for something in a source repository and think you understand, you know, where that was meant to go or what it was meant to do. But until you're really digging around and understand the language, you might not totally understand what the intent of that was, or even if there was an intent. Because in that interview, this is on our YouTube channel, by the way, for anyone listening, it's the
We
Video
will put
Game
a link
History
to that, of
Foundation.
course.
Sure, yeah. The Video Game History Foundation's YouTube channel, the whole talk is on there. There are plenty of things in there that if you were just kind of trolling through folders and stuff, you might consider to be cut content. And then in talking to Ron Gilbert, he's like, no, I think that was just an artist playing around and like, you know, doodling, and these were totally placeholders. They never had any real function in the game. They never had any real purpose. And that, like, it's so rare that we have that complete of an understanding of a video game, and how a game was made and how, you know, what decisions went into it. Because even if we do have access to the source code, which already is incredibly rare, you know, as that conversation demonstrated, you might draw some incorrect conclusions from it if you don't also talk to the people who worked on it. So I mean, it's basically an impossible ask to really get the 100% complete picture, and we still don't have that for Monkey Island, because you'd really have to get every single person who worked on it in a room together, all playing around with the source at the same time, and maybe get a time machine at least 20 years ago so that their memories are a little bit more fresh. I mean, it's, you know, you're never going to get it perfect, but to get closer to that, I think was really, really cool, because it's just so, you don't get that from games. You don't, you know, there's, even if you conduct 10 interviews, and even if you have, you know, some of the source documents, you have email correspondence and stuff, I mean, you're never getting a quite complete picture. So it was cool to get pretty close to that for Monkey Island.
Well, we got some exclusives, some exclusive interviews, for example, from Japan and from Spain. And I wish there would be a bit spread more, but that didn't happen. But yeah, well,
but that's one of the reasons that, you know, like we started doing this, because there was so much stuff that we wanted to know about that was obscure, and just, you know, like you were talking about these things in Monkey Island that you wouldn't necessarily know about, and you know, and there's stuff that you watch interviews and it's always the same kind of like, how did you get started in your thing, and it's always the same questions. It's like, no, I want to know about, you know, in Maniac Mansion, what's the deal with the hamster? You know, like
that was
what
the first question AJ
yeah,
asked.
right, yeah, like what's your problem with hamsters?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, that's the stuff that I want to know about that nobody asks, you know. So
yeah, and
it's true.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is, like, most of these kinds of interviews don't set the world on fire, but when you do have the historian who's then trying to go in and dig and learn more, the fact that it already exists, and that, you know, especially if any of these people are no longer with us, like, you know, like is the case with Ralph Baer, it's like, oh, thank God people have been conducting these interviews.
right, yeah, right.
Too late now.
The Atari dig took 4 hours.
Yeah.
Because Joe Lewandowski wouldn't stop speaking.
Oh yeah, he was great, because every time we'd be like, all right, so wrapping up, and he's like, oh, I just got one more story for you. It's like, okay.
Oh, for when they were digging out the cartridges?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, he was he was the guy that found them.
Yeah,
Oh,
and actually I met him in Frankfurt at a press conference. So I met him in person, and when I came in with my Scene World t-shirt in the press conference, and all the others with their suits from the newspapers and stuff, he was like, oh, finally a gamer, finally somebody who knows his stuff, you know? I was like, oh my god, that's awesome. I was like, wow. So he was so happy to see me there. Yeah. So it's really, really a thing. Yeah. So well, if you need anything for your preservation or your stories, you can access our archive. It's also as a copy on archive.org. So
Fantastic.
yeah, like you said, a lot of interviews aren't going to set the world on fire, but in aggregate, at the end of the day, when these people aren't around, even the most
Right.
boring of interview is going to have something in it that's.
Well, and plus taking
Exactly.
pieces of the different interviews over time, you'll get more of the full story.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel like
Well,
you're
well,
not
you
going to
might
get the
even-
full story just through one
True,
interview,
true.
but you'll get
Exactly,
different
'cause-
takes.
Because I mean, we've talked a little bit about memory already, but I mean, people contradict themselves all the time, and they contradict each other, and you don't really get,
Right.
you don't get close to the actual truth until you have several of these, spanning a couple of different people stacked up, and then you're like, okay, well, this guy said
Yeah.
this, and this guy said almost the same thing, and then this guy said something totally different, and now we have to figure out what, what the real story is here.
And that is what I did in a couple of cases. For example, you mentioned Ron Gilbert, and what I actually didn't know, but AJ threw that in the interview with Ron Gilbert, that Ron Gilbert coined the name cutscenes, for self-animated scenes in video games. So I went back a few years later and interviewed Paco Portello, who actually who actually invented cutscenes without knowing it. And that was kind of difficult because
He didn't name it.
Right.
he didn't name it, and he would only do Spanish interviews. So he actually got a translator for that interview.
Oh wow.
So if Frank or you, if you are interested to know the stories before Ron Gilbert's Maniac Mansion, this is the interview where it goes into depths why cutscenes were invented and how it happened, and I think it's around 2 hours on this whole topic.
And I think firsts are so weird too, because it's really hard to prove like a true first
Yeah.
to something,
Yeah.
especially when a lot of things can sort of fit the definition, and it's like, is this the first one? Because it's kind of that. I mean, even trying to define what the first video game is, don't listen to anyone who says they have the answer. No one has the actual answer. It is a complete matter of philosophy, like what you believe constitutes a video game, where the line is drawn, and that is no one's got the correct answer to that, because you can draw that line in like 4 different places. So
Yeah.
So how is it for you when you talk to a pioneer and so on? Are you starstruck in a way?
Not typically. I've had a couple of moments of it where I guess I would say the closest I come to starstruck is around Japanese developers, and that's only like due to the sheer inaccessibility of them, for the most part. So I had the chance to definitely not interview, unfortunately, but I had the chance to talk a little bit to Hisashi Nogami and Ayakyu Goku, who both worked on Animal Crossing. Ayakyu Goku's the current series director. Hisashi Nogami worked on the original, and has been still involved even today. Aya speaks pretty good English. Hisashi Nogami doesn't really speak any English, so I was talking through a friend, and I would say that's probably the closest to starstruck I got, because it was just like, this isn't a real interview, but I still want to like ask you things and talk to you, and it's more kind of like a I don't know. It was a situation that felt very like superstar-y compared to a lot of the other ones I do, which are just, phone interviews typically. And, most people, obviously there's some insanely talented and incredible people in this space, but for the most part, they are all pretty normal human beings that are good at talking, and, like they're not scary if you don't treat them like they're scary, I guess is
Right,
the
right.
best way to put it.
Yeah. Well, I had to learn to go over that and be persistent.
Yeah.
It's like it's sometimes not easy. Try to remember now.
My dog's a minor internet celebrity. You can be starstruck.
Oh, what a cutie.
Bringing the bringing the dog always helps.
Yes.
Well, I mean, I had this situation, John Romero. Everybody is like, "How did you get your interview with John Romero? How did that happen?" Well, I sent him an email and he said yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the problem to get this interview actually happening, that wasn't easy, because he wouldn't show up, and then I would call him on his mobile and he was like, "Oh, I totally forgot, I'm having dinner now, can we do it next week?" And then
Yeah.
I would call next week, I'm like, "Oh, now I'm in a meeting, can we do it in 2 weeks?" And yeah, so at the beginning when we started all this, I was like, I can't make the phone call and disturb somebody. But as AJ said, if you don't keep trying, in some situations you don't have a result. So I
Yeah.
guess that's for you also something you have to learn as you progress with the Game History Foundation. You have to
Absolutely.
be persistent and convince people how important it is to get those stories preserved.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's something that I think everyone struggles with to a degree. Is like after rejection number 3, it's like, how do you keep going after that? You can't go
Yeah.
forever, because at some point you start, bothering people, and if they're depends on their responses, of course. But yeah, it's yeah, persistence is huge for sure.
Yeah.
Do you have a story perhaps that was your biggest achievement, that you thought would never happen but finally did, and you are so proud of it, if there's anything?
Oh, of getting a response from someone, or
Yes, and finally getting your piece of information or your interview. Is there something that stands out of all that years?
I'm trying to think if there's a really good example. I mean, I could certainly think of some times where, yeah, just coming back and asking another time um, has worked, and I've gotten interesting stories out of it. I can't think of anyone that like would be really, because like I said, I mean, I like to talk about a lot of the sort of more niche stuff. So a lot of these are names that don't mean anything to most people. They're not like household names, but
Do you have an interesting story though? You got like maybe something more recent that came up?
um yeah, I just recently interviewed someone who, this is a total weird one, but I'm excited uh, to share it, which will be soon. There was a company out of Rochester, New York, that made kiosks for stores, like, just little electronic kiosks. And for a while, they were powering these kiosks with TurboGrafx 16s. And the software they would write for these companies was like they were developing a quote unquote video game for the TurboGrafx.
Wow,
And then
that's
just
what
hiding
There were
it.
enough TurboGrafx 16s to do that.
Yeah, I mean, they were cheap. No one was buying them. So
Yeah. I feel like they only made like 12 of them.
And that's why they're expensive now.
Yeah.
yeah, they're all in these kiosks. Yeah, I mean, it only came up. This isn't something, they obviously didn't advertise this. They wanted the buyers to think that there was a really high-end computer in there because, they're selling it for a significant chunk of change. So they weren't advertising like, yeah, we stuck a video game console in this thing and that's what's powering it. So the only reason we even know this exists is because one of our board members found a TurboGrafx that had a strange sticker placed over all of the parts that said TurboGrafx on it. And we were like, what is Interad? What is this company Interad? And did some research, and then got on the phone with several of the people who ran this company to talk about it. They're all because this was more of like a tech and computer company, these guys are even older. These are people who, like the founder like worked at Xerox for a long time. I mean, so he was super helpful in filling out some of the story, but like, he didn't work on the TurboGrafx part of it. He just ran the business. And so after several attempts, I was finally able to get in touch with the guy who actually programmed all the programs for this machine. And he was able to fill me in on how it worked, and what the sort of pipeline was for it. And he was very young at the time. I think he said he was like 19 or 20, and he was just this sort of like boy genius coder that was able to turn a TurboGrafx into a into a computer they could use. And it's not. It might not be a super interesting story to a lot of people, but I'm personally really interested in the sort of like intersection of video games and totally not video game uses for them.
It's
Wow.
repurposing a video game system for something completely different. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Totally.
I mean, computers were really expensive for a really long time, and video game consoles were often sold, at a break even or at a loss. And so consoles were often just as powerful as a PC, but, obviously limited in a lot of ways and much cheaper. So, I mean, it's happened several times that companies have used video game systems to sort of like fulfill a different tech purpose. And, the Game Boy sewing machine is another example of that. As I mentioned earlier, like that's to make a sewing machine with an onboard computer for selecting, different stitch types and embroidery types and that sort of thing. That was going to be really, really expensive. What was way less expensive was a little, $90 or $80 Game Boy that you could program that stuff into and then attach to it. So, that kind of stuff is really interesting to me. But it was cool to speak to the person who was actually like, he's like, yeah, they'd send me the cartridge in the mail back, and I'd reprogram to add whatever new stuff they wanted in their catalog and flash it onto EPROMs and send it back to them. And like just that sort of the use of a video game system and like the video game development pipeline to do something totally different, I thought was really interesting.
And when is that coming out, and where?
I don't know yet. I'm transcribing all of the interviews right now, and I think I'm just going to do like an oral history blog post on our site. I'm not 100% sure yet. I do have a unit that I'm excited to photograph and show people. I guess this is the first time I've talked about this publicly, so
whoa, an exclusive.
Yeah.
Maybe an opportunity to revive your YouTube channel, throw a little video of it working on there.
Yeah, I don't know if I've got time for that, but
fair enough.
Yeah. You're not the only person to suggest that. I'm sure it is a good idea. It's just the time it takes, because I'm not a good video editor, nor am I particularly great in front of a camera. So none of that comes easy.
I had no
video
complaints.
editing takes a long time.
I mean, it worked good enough for me to, to remember your name when you showed up in my Twitter feed with the history game, gaming history foundation. I was like, oh my god, I know this name. So I was like, yeah, finally I have a reason to invite you and Frank. So that's totally awesome. And well, as I said, this kiosk story is totally great, because especially niche things people are less interested in preserving for a reason,
Oh yeah,
that's so sad,
There's what they use, and this is more a computer, but I mean they considered it a lot at that time. The C64, 90s to early 2000s was just an obsolete game thing. They used that for like the subway, like the TV things in the subway in certain places in Europe and whatnot. And there's a lot of that sort of thing, where it's not, they use this stuff like that. I love hearing too. There was a story in I think it was Chicago, where an Amiga, an old Amiga was being used to run the entire the HVAC system in a school.
Yeah, and that's kind of stuff is so fun to me, because no one at this company considered themselves to be a part of video games whatsoever. And I mean, they're right. Like, they're not, other than the fact that they were using a video game console to accomplish their other, unrelated tech goals. But like, that is the kind of thing that, that's not going to show up in a video game history, because the people who worked on it have they certainly don't think of it as being a
Right.
part of video game history. So you have to
Right.
sort of already know about it and then go seek them out in
Yeah.
a lot of those cases.
Or even there was a big story, it was everywhere. That there was an auto shop in, I think it was in Poland, that was still using
Poland, yes, it was
64, yeah.
Poland.
I think they're still using it now. The guy wrote custom software for balancing drive shafts. And
Wow.
and so just they showed this picture of this this greasy, dirty old C64 that's been running since the 80s, and if the software works, he never had to change it. But again, like you said, this isn't something that he would never think of himself as a video game guy. It's just this was a thing he used for the job. It worked for it, and whatever.
And the internals just happen to be components from a video game system.
Right. Exactly. Right. Yeah. Right.
But the Commodore 64 wasn't a video game system.
Oh, no, I mean, people consider it a video game system. I mean, that's when you.
I never considered it a video game system.
That's how I
consider
justify
it.
having one.
Yeah, but a lot of people thought of the 64, especially in the 90s and 2000s, as just you play video games on it. Nobody was writing a novel on a C64 in 2005. No, you're playing an old game on it. You're gonna play some game whose name I can't think of.
You mentioned the diabetes edutainment software. One thing that I'm pretty proud of is I interviewed John Mack, who designed and did the graphics for Operation Frog.
Oh yeah,
That's that totally even changed the school systems and school law in '84, allowing students to use this software instead of taking apart real frogs. So
Yeah.
it even changed society.
I had to take apart a real frog. I didn't want to.
I didn't have to do that, but I also didn't play a computer game. I think they just did away with that entirely. I don't know.
I did have to dissect a frog.
Did you?
Yeah, we dissected frogs and mice.
Oh, we didn't get
Well, it
much.
wasn't my favorite part, but
We got a cat. There was a cat, just one.
that was the
Whoa.
AP class.
Ooh.
Yeah. No, ours was if you stay after school. We found
Oh.
somebody
We
found
found a cat in the back alleyway.
Yeah, essentially, yeah. Somebody found a cat on the road, so we're gonna take it apart.
No, I'm
I'll
too
pass.
squeamish.
So I'm glad I'm German then, and not part of the American society, taking apart pets and animals.
I'm not sure that they do it anymore, but they must have for a certain amount of time.
Well, it was thanks to John Mack and his team that this changed in '84. It's yeah. Well, I'm totally fascinated by things that are totally not important to the majority of people.
Yes.
But I find those stories the utmost interesting and exciting. So.
Yeah, I think they're fun.
Oh, learning about the obscure and just the unknown, it's cool.
Yeah.
Right.
It's just nice to know. It's like a little piece of knowledge that not a lot of people know about.
Mm-hmm.
I also I think of it as just sort of like coloring in the corners of video game history. I mean, there's some parts of it that are clearly incredibly important and that should be studied and are big deal, but there's other things happening around those, the big things at the same time. And I think just having a clearer picture of the entire thing, like, yes, there's big games happening, there's small games happening, and there's also people using this technology for weird reasons.
In experimental ways.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And there are still those people thinking gaming is a waste of time, and why would you need to preserve them?
Yeah, those people are just wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, you can say the same about any kind of art, right? Like, it's if it doesn't serve like a utilitarian purpose. But that's what culture is, right? Like, that's why we care about culture.
Right.
Because...
and it's a thing that I've heard a lot is I've done graphics on the C64 for years, and it's why do you keep using this old machine? And it's because that's what I do graphics on. It's like Paint is pretty obsolete too, but people still use it.
That they do.
I think it's cool, and some of the best things are born out of limitations. I feel like it's a way to challenge yourself as an artist, is to work within some kind
Yeah.
of constraint. So
Right. Exactly.
Another thing that would interest to know your opinion about is this year a lot of YouTubers started saying that collecting video games isn't worth it, and they actually quit the hobby. And I think you, Kelsey, you
Who said
also
that?
a lot of big YouTubers.
I did a lot of collecting last year.
Yeah,
I
I
mean-
did
I
the
mean,
exact
I
People-
think
opposite.
my collection went from like 700 games to like 1,000
Yeah.
just last
mean-
year alone.
I mean, my point was you're also collecting, right? You're also a collector. So what's your opinion on that? I mean, okay, HA didn't see it, but I saw a lot of
You guys can't
Oh,
see it,
YouTube.
but my collection has grown substantially since I put that shelf up like a year ago.
yeah,
Mine took over a room.
Yeah, well, I got a room upstairs as well. Yeah. This is just
Yeah,
what I
mine
want down
is-
here.
mine is still not quite unpacked here after moving
Oh,
here a couple months
okay.
ago. So, yeah, I mean, I own a couple of game stores, so obviously we get lots of collectors. I am a collector myself, although I've really slowed down a lot over the past couple of years because I've accomplished most of my major goals, and all of my other goals are, very, very expensive, and I can talk about that in a second. But I think the reason that a lot of people are quitting right now is it's simply a really good time to sell. I mean, there's far more interest in game collecting right now. So when you have a limited supply of things, because they aren't making more retro games, they're retro, they're they're vintage artifacts, right? So when you have an increased demand and a always slowly dwindling supply, prices go up, and that's just kind of how it works. And it's
I think the pandemic's got anything to do with that. People
Totally.
also, not working and could use the extra money from selling off, 10 or 15 games.
Yeah. I mean, the pandemic has affected it in a lot of ways, but I mean, certainly, like all hobbies, just the concept of hobbies in general have taken off because people are stuck at home. So they're, adding new hobbies or getting more into hobbies they already had. So, obviously.
Yeah, with people being at home as often as they are now, I feel like they've just got more free time. So
Exactly.
like for example, I have a Yoshi's Island cartridge for the Super Comboy. And, like 2 years ago, nobody knew what that was.
I still don't know what that is.
I have it right here.
That's really cool, actually.
But yeah, it was Hyundai back in the day in Korea. They produced the Super Famicom out in Korea, and they licensed. These are U.S. games. It's got the U.S. ROM for Yoshi's Island, but it's in a Super Famicom format. But like I said, 2 years ago, nobody knew what it was. I picked this up for $20 because the person didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
Now they're going for like upwards of $1,000 on eBay because people found out what it was and there's interest.
Yeah, the small market
Wow.
stuff is weird. I have a very small amount, but I have a handful of Brazilian stuff, the officially licensed Playtronic distributed
Nice.
Brazilian Nintendo stuff, and yeah, there's just a really low supply of that stuff. So even if there's not a lot of people after it, you're really fighting for a very limited amount of stuff. And the same thing with, I mean, my big collection that I've focused on is the Wonder Swan Japanese handheld that I'm a really big fan of, and I completed the full set last year. And we can argue semantics on what full set means, because there are technically like 3 variant covers I'm missing that are just, I mean, I've seen one of the 3 pop up ever in the last 2.5 years. So we'll see if I ever get those, but I have at least a version of every single game released, including some of the stuff that most people wouldn't count. Like there was the 2 rarest things in my collection. There is a Japanese artist named Toshio Owai. He made Electroplankton, and he's just a kind of like a mixed media digital experience artist, very big in Japan. He did an exhibit in the early 2000s where he used WonderSwans as part of the art installation, and he programmed like little things onto them, and that was the installation. So one of them was like just some illustrations that kind of danced when you pressed buttons, and then the other one was a music device. It's difficult to explain. It's like a music toy called Tenori On, and he actually later partnered with Yamaha to turn it into like an actual musical instrument. It's basically the actual instrument is this big kind of arcade stick looking thing that's just buttons all the way across, and you press the buttons to light them up, and then they play like a note in a repeating rhythm, so you can light up a certain design, and all of it sounds good. It's meant to be a toy to just kind of experiment with music, and it'll always sound good no matter how many buttons you light up, no matter which buttons you light up. But his first kind of prototype for this was on a WonderSwan. It's a WonderSwan version of this, and it was used for an art exhibit. And then, there was this kind of like WonderSwan online community that were like, hey, that was really cool. We went to go see this. These are all Japanese people, but like, we went to see this. Can you like make a copy of this? Like, can you sell this as a game? Because I would buy it. And he did. He ended up hand making 120 of these cartridges and sold them at the next art exhibit. Anyways, I have one of those.
That's cool.
So I think most people would not consider that to be like, you don't need that to have the full set, because it's not like you could, go buy that at a store or anything. But gosh, I forgot where I was going with this.
Well, you said it depends on who you are. What is a full set and what isn't?
Oh, right, yeah.
With the variant covers.
Yeah, but before that, I mean, we're talking about like prices going up and stuff. Like, there's not a lot of people collecting WonderSwan like I am. There's not a lot of people going for a full set. There's not a lot of people collecting the system in general. There's definitely some people in Japan, but there's also not a lot of supply. So these prices have been going up, and some of these cost me quite a bit of money. So yeah, I mean, there are people who are seeing all of that, and they're just like, I think it's time for me to get out of the hobby. And I think especially if you started collecting in like the early to mid 2000s, when everything was dirt cheap, yeah, by all means, like, cash out and because I get it, like I started collecting but probably not seriously until about 2012, but had some games before that, and even back in 2012, which is only about 10 years ago. Yeah, I mean, everything was a lot more affordable, and spending $40 on a game was like, oh, $40, my god, that's
I
so
remember
expensive
back in
for a retro game.
2013 buying like a lot on eBay. It was like, I think 15 complete in box N64 games for like $200.
Yeah.
And at the time, I'm just like, I can't believe I just spent $200 on Nintendo 64 games. And now I'm looking at it, and it's like, that was a steal.
Yeah.
Well,
I got Conker's Bad Fur Day, which is worth more than that alone.
Yeah, there you go.
Now.
Just sell that one, and you've already paid for it. So.
But it's just funny how like times have changed. Like back then, that seemed like a lot of money, and now that's a steal.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm certainly biased as someone who owns a game store. So I don't know if everyone's going to agree with this. Although most of our clientele is not collectors; it's just people who want to play video games. But
okay.
Oh yeah, they way outnumber collectors. Like just in general in the world, right? So it makes sense that that most people who come in are just looking for
probably just to walk in, look at the games, see the physical stock, and then it's like impulse. You know what? I want that. I want to play that.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, a lot of people buying PS5, PS4, Xbox One, Switch games, that sort of thing.
Contemporary games, yeah.
Yeah, but there's also a lot of people who, they've got their PS5 or PS4 or whatever, but they also still have like an Xbox 360 at home, and they're like, oh yeah, I used to play, Modern Warfare 3. Let me just pick that up real quick too, and it's not really like it's sort of a retro-ish game for them, but it's not like it's not necessarily like I'm gonna go relive my childhood right now. It's like I'm gonna go relive my, college dorm days or something like that.
I mean, I
So-
feel like the word retro just in general, it's so different now because like
Yeah.
I still associate retro with being like NES, Super NES, like 8-bit graphics, 16-bit graphics.
Yes,
But now
right.
to look at it, it's like the GameCube is considered a retro console.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah.
though like to me, I still like remember picking up my GameCube at Target. So like
Yeah, if
Oh,
you're
yeah,
playing
people
by
are-
the 20-year
surreal.
rule.
People are
we're,
making Windows XP retro rigs, and it's like,
yeah, that too.
like,
Meanwhile, I remember using Windows 95. So
yeah, yeah.
Oh my god, I'm so
I-
old here. When
I
I
still got
started,
computers at work. You were running XP.
yeah, well, now I totally found the video that was the first time I got aware of you, and that was how to spot fake Nintendo games. That was in September 2016 for
Yeah.
Metal Jesus Rocks.
I think that's how I first found out about you too, Kelsey, was on Metal Jesus.
Yeah,
exactly.
Many
That's
years
for
ago.
This video. This video. And now that we talk about this topic of how people get out of collecting or collecting getting more expensive, there's also a market for fakes. It's pretty intense right now. I mean there are constantly people trying to sell fakes, re-wrapped, re-shrinked,
Yep.
Oh,
and like
yeah.
never opened, and then you get the
I
gift
I
back
love it when
was
there's
opened before.
I love
right?
it when there's a listing and it says never opened, and yet it shows all the package contents.
Yeah.
Yeah, it shows it out of the box. Like,
Yeah,
here's the
uh-huh.
box, here's the
Yeah.
cartridge.
Yeah,
the
never
manual.
opened. Yeah,
And-
like,
And in the case of Gianna Sisters, there was a seller selling 50 units, new of Gianna Sister for the Commodore 64, signed by Chris Hülsbeck. And I was like, he surely remembers this moment, this day when he signed
He's got the
50
Sharpie in the
copies,
picture in the listing.
50 copies of the game that he did music for. That must be a fake, That must be a fake.
yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely, I mean, anywhere that people can make money, there's going to be some level of scam or, just people trying to capitalize on that in other ways, right? And there's certainly a market for some of this stuff. I mean, I especially think about how people make like replacement housing for Game Boys and that sort of thing. So it's like, look, for someone who really wants a Pokemon themed Game Boy, but they don't want to shell out the money it actually costs. I mean, in theory, I don't feel like there's much morally wrong with that, but the problem arises when when it goes to the next person, right? Like when the next person doesn't know if something is real or not.
Yeah, someone buying it thinking it's an authentic Pokemon Game Boy and it's just an aftermarket shell.
Exactly. Yeah. So that stuff can get pretty difficult. Games, for the most part, so far have been fairly easy to verify their authenticity, at least, cartridge-based stuff and CD-based stuff for the most part, too. Seals are becoming a weird one because there's obviously a lot of money to be made in sealed games, and there really isn't a lot of foolproof ways to check if something is legitimately sealed, because the same machines that that sealed these games in the first place, like there are still, I don't know if the original machines are around, but like machines that serve the exact same function are absolutely still around. So there's really nothing stopping someone from having access to one of those machines and sealing something in a quote unquote authentic way, right? But
Plus
without
the different variants of the different seals too, like how you have the different seams in certain ones, or third-party games won't have them.
Yeah, I mean some of the Nintendo stuff is a little bit easier. It's a little bit harder to replicate an H seam than it is to replicate just the standard Y fold that's on all
Like a CD.
Yeah, on pretty much all like disc-based systems. So I don't really get into that because I think that it's really not possible, in my opinion, to actually verify, like certifiably 100% this is absolutely real. I think that's nearly impossible to do now, given the tools out there, which is frustrating. So,
but your number one advice was always have with you a set of screwdrivers.
Yeah.
To open the cartridges.
Yep. Yeah, it's for cartridge-based stuff. It's fairly easy to determine. Like there's still, to my knowledge at least, there's still not like 100% accurately replicated fakes out there. So by opening it up, you can almost always remove all doubt. And if you're paying for something expensive, it's something I definitely recommend.
What's your opinion about those reprints of games and games being republished? And I remember, I think it was around the same time that there was a scandal when they found out that some cartridges can actually damage your console because they are using transistors of the wrong voltage, and it would age the console.
Was that the Genesis one or the Mega Drive?
Yes, I believe it was.
Yeah, I mean that's obviously a big problem. In general, I mean, as long as everything is above the board, which it often is with these places, like Limited Run has been doing some reprints of things like Shantae and stuff, and these are with like the creators are involved in this. It's not like they're just saying Shantae's mine now and I'm going to sell it and the original creators see nothing. Like it's these are actual business contracts worked out and stuff. So although not with Nintendo, but that's a whole other thing. But they've been very good about, like, it says on the cartridge that this is the Limited Run like reproduction of this. I think as long as things are made clear,
it's identifiable
they
that
are.
It's like a reproduction, or
exactly, yeah, as long as things are made clear that that's what they are. And I'm not a huge fan of people just like reprinting Little Samson and then selling it themselves, because it's not really yours.
One of the rarest games, right?
But
the rarest game.
Yeah, I mean,
for the NES, I believe, right? Was it NES?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
I remember that correctly. Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I think giving people another way of owning something physically, if it's important to them to own it physically, and it's clear that it's not the original, then I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. That's a a totally, like, you're not hurting at least you're not hurting the consumer in any way with that.
Right. Well, I mean, around the same time the scandal happened with the cartridges that age or destroy your console, I bought the Street Fighter 2 re-release from Capcom via IM8-bit for Street Fighter 2, and actually there is a warning on the back of the cartridge with a label saying, "We don't guarantee that this game doesn't put your console on fire."
Yeah, yeah, I saw that.
I was like,
I mean,
that's always a good sign.
Yeah, there should. It would be better if there was some more technical control, I guess, in some of these, and making sure that they're totally safe. But that's just. I think that's just kind of where the market's at right now. There's not a lot of people who. Already not a lot of people who are willing to pay. Gosh, wasn't that Street Fighter thing like $100 for like a $15 Super Nintendo game?
Right. Well, there's a secret. I found out that IM8-bit since this year has Savvy as their partners in Germany, and now I can get the game cheaper than in the US and without the income taxes. Which is weird because they are reseller. How can they sell it to Germans cheaper? That's totally beyond my imagination, but I'm happy that it's possible. So I just got Aladdin and Lions King like 2 days ago, and
nice.
I was totally impressed about the quality. So
I'm just going to say, talking about quality, nothing will ever beat the cover art of Super Mario Land DX for Game Boy, which I'll just hold up to the camera there, which is quite possibly the best Mario cover art.
I don't know. Super Pika Land might have you beat.
Yeah, it might. Yes, that is true.
Yeah. Well, I mean, thinking about, I made some purchases back in the day, um, like 10 years ago. For example, Hugo, which is a little kobold that was actually invented in Denmark and spread around even US at some point. And the cartridge for the Commodore 64 10 years ago, they said they only had 5 units left in the whole world. And I was lucky that I got one of them in an email auction. And I paid like I paid 70 euros for it, which is like $80, $85. And I totally thought back then, like, wow, this will be ever the most expensive game that I bought. And it turned out a few years back, I actually paid 200 for another game in a rare version. So the limit grows higher.
Yeah, I mean, there was a time where I was pretty sure I was never going to spend more than $100 on a game, and let's see, what is my record right now? $4,200.
Wow.
I don't remember those days. But
I honestly don't know that I've spent more than 100 on one single game. I mean, but like
That's
my
great.
collection
Never go for a full WonderSwan set.
I'm cheap, but I try to collect things as cheap as I can.
Yeah.
So that because like that Yoshi cartridge, I would never buy it for $1,000.
Right.
Ever. It's Yoshi's Island. I would go pick up a $25, $30 cartridge for the Super Nintendo and call it a day. But
well, last year we interviewed Dennis Orbai, who is the most known Neo Geo collector, and he is spending 1,000 euros or 2,000 on a single game.
yeesh.
Oh, at least, yeah.
Yeah, and that's totally normal for him. He has like the largest collection of Neo Geo games in the world. That's like super amazing. And I like, what do you have to sell, a kidney or something to get such a large collection of such old expensive games,
No, because the kidney only goes for about $10,000, I think. So you probably need to sell both of them.
So yeah, that's actually true. So there's even there's basically no limit. It really depends on the system. Or talk about pinball machines.
Yeah.
That's like 4,000, 5,000 bucks.
Yeah, I have not waded into the well, I mean, I live in Seattle where you can't buy space, so I don't have the space for that kind of stuff anyways, but maybe if I had a basement or something like that, but that stuff definitely gets expensive.
I have a little hint for that. When I moved in my flat, the question was couch or arcade machine.
I'm gonna go with couch.
Yeah.
And I went for the other thing.
As a result, when you stay over at his house, you have to sleep on the arcade machine.
Mm.
No.
Is it at least like a 4-player unit so you can kind of spread
No,
out?
it's
The tube on it keeps you
players.
warm.
It's like
Yeah,
X-Men,
exactly.
so you
Right,
can kind of maybe sleep in a circle around it.
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is, people always ask me, does your stuff work? I'm like, yeah, sure. Why would I have something broken in my flat? That doesn't make sense.
Hey, why don't you turn it on? Because I mean, geez, like I've got everything behind me. I go through the process of turning things on. I even loaded her picture in a web browser.
I noticed that.
Yeah, you see, nah, I'm not
Very
that.
special.
I'm enjoying it myself in private. Or when people come over, you're all invited to come over if you
Hey, at least
ever
you
make
play
a trip
it.
to Germany.
Yeah.
At least you play the thing. I have a Sharp NES TV that I literally just have in storage because I don't have room for it, and I'm terrified of breaking the feet on it. So
That's why I sold mine.
I'm considering it honestly, but at the same time, it's like I'll never find one again. So it's like weighing the pros and cons. It's fine in storage, out of sight, out of mind for a little while.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about the pain of sellers that think that newspaper is a good padding material for heavy and rare stuff.
Yeah, let me just pack your $200 game in some newspaper.
Right, you know.
At least you're getting newspaper, and
you
sometimes
know,
it's just sent to a mailer.
I told the seller, there is a secret material. It's called bubble wrap.
Mm-hmm.
But
that's. I mean, that happened with Joerg ordered a game and they wouldn't ship it to Europe, so he shipped it to my house. And remember, there was no packing material at all. It was just in a box.
Exactly. That was Street Fighter 2.
Yeah, Street Fighter 2 in a box that was about that big. So it just kind of flopped around.
Yeah.
You could, take the box.
I actually imported a
That's the
disc-only PlayStation 1 demo disc from France, and it took like 2 months to come. They literally shipped it. It was in a bubble mailer with no packing material at all. It was just a disc
Did it
in a
crack?
sleeve. No.
Wow.
And it came all the way from France. I was just like super impressed.
I had one thing shipped from France once where the seller just did not. I don't even know how this managed to like clear customs. They just didn't put my address on it. Like they just put the city and the zip code and my name, and somehow it made it, because of the zip code, it made it at least to my local post office. But I was like, man, it should have arrived like 2 weeks ago. And I went down to the post office and they were like, oh yeah, we have this just like unaddressed package to you. Like, how did that make it? How did that leave the country?
I have
the magic thing that I learned about zip codes, because I actually wrote a program that made the barcodes for zip codes on the Commodore 64 back in like the 90s, is
That's
that the zip code +4, that extra 4 digits, encodes your actual address. So all you would have to do is put down your zip code and those extra 4 digits on an envelope, and it would go to you. No name, nothing else.
Interesting. Well, it did go. But
that works.
Cool.
That works in America, but it wouldn't work in Germany. But
Yeah.
anyway, but I have a similar story. When there was a economic crisis in Great Britain, you could get games for a pound on diskette or on tape, and I got Tetris on tape for the Commodore 64, and the seller was so frustrated, he just put on a Joerg and my my street name, no city whatsoever, no city zip code, and I actually was talking to my postman, to the postman, like, I'm looking for this bubble wrap mailer that should come in a bit thick, and he said, like, I got something in the sorting center for your city, perhaps that is for you, and he gave it to me the next day. So that was totally amazed.
See, now I'm getting all nervous because I got a laptop being delivered today, like a brand new laptop, and I am like, now I'm all concerned it's going to be like 1,000 pieces here, or it's going to go somewhere else.
And the seller is fishy when he asks you to make the claim on the parcel shipping company for damages, and I'm like, your packaging was so shit, the insurance will not be valid. They will say no.
Yeah, you need to have sufficient packing material in order to file that kind of claim.
And you already have a bad feeling when the box the device is in is twisting and turning.
Oh boy.
And they're like, okay. And I like the moment when you shake it and it rattles. That's another thing.
Oh yeah. Oh good. I ordered an iMac G3 years ago, and it arrived at the house, and the box looked intact, but on the inside of the box was just like shards of nothing. Like it was dust. There was nothing identifiable as a computer anymore.
it's brutal.
Or what I got like.
Or they just sent you a box of dust.
Well, that
Like-
that could be too. Or
Like
or
the PS3s back in the day that were just bricks.
Yeah, I got an iMac, or not an iMac. I'm sorry, a Power Mac G5, a big aluminum, like 70-pound, tower, and somehow the bottom of it they managed to dent, like the aluminum was actually dented. I don't know how to do it, how they did it, because like I tried to undent it, like literally by driving over it in my car and stuff, and it would not undent it. Like I don't know how it's humanly possible to dent it like that without
Hammer,
like industrial.
I don't know.
yeah, they would need like industrial machinery to do it.
I guess where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah.
Funny. Yeah, we reached out in absurdity in this podcast.
Yes,
now.
we did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of which, so on that note, where can people go to find out what you're doing and to follow along at home?
Sure. Yeah. So you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Kelsey Lewin. KELSLEWIN. You can also follow the Video Game History Foundation. We're at gamehistory.org, or our website is gamehistory.org. We do a video game history podcast as well through the foundation called the Video Game History Hour. And if you are in the Seattle area, come visit my stores. We're Pink Gorilla Games. We sell mostly just merchandise and that sort of thing online, but at pinkgorillagames.com. Is that enough plugs for you?
Awesome. We will put links to everything in the podcast description, and people will be seeing this on the screen if they're watching at home.
Thank you so much.
I don't know what it's called in English. I think Magic Roundabout, somebody who does everything.
I think we call it wearing many hats.
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah.
Wearing many hats.
Yeah.
Yes.
I wear many hats.
Not today though. Today you will be a headset.
No.
Yeah.
I am hatless today, but
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, as you said, you are still working on progressing with the History Gaming Foundation. Perhaps we should have a follow-up in a few years and see where you are progressing there.
absolutely.
And perhaps we can have Frank joining too. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, sure.
if you ever make it, to have time, that would be great.
Oh, you're talking about the other, not our. Oh, it's
No.
I was like, yeah,
she's
why
not
would-
alone.
why
She's
wouldn't
not
he be
alone.
there? Yeah.
It's not
Frank's
a
a faulty.
it's not a foundation of just one person. You said like 3, right? Or
Yeah, we just hired our third. Phil Salvador just joined us as our full-time library director, which I am super excited about. We now have someone working on the actual collection full-time. Frank and I, like I mentioned, I mean, there's just so much to do, and I think any institution that's or group or whatever
Awesome.
that's kind of working in this space will tell you, like, there's just never enough manpower. And so we've been, running the foundation and doing as much of the preservation as we possibly can, and some advocacy. But what that means practically is, like, things get backed up, things get digitized, and then they go into a pile, and it's not like well sorted or cataloged or anything like that. So now we have a full-time librarian who is working with all of that, and that is their main job function. So we're really excited to have much more of that, much more accessible.
So perhaps some of the interviews we did, especially for the historical part, are interested to fill some gaps, perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. If you want to listen to listen or look at our archives, you're welcome. There are actually 2 things I'm having planned, but I couldn't because of the pandemic. One thing is a factory tour at Tectoy in Brazil.
Oh, that's awesome.
And they want to show me how they are still developing master systems with Mega Drives for the
Wow.
retro market.
That's
And,
really cool.
And I actually got a personal invitation from the founder of the company. So now that he retired 2 years ago, I got his private phone number and I'm in touch with him over WhatsApp, And the second project that we have planned is, do you probably know the iPhone guy, Scotty Allen?
Mhm.
Does that ring a bell for you, Kelsey?
I'm not as
Okay.
up on the mobile stuff, unfortunately.
Okay, well, he became famous in 27 because he moved to China and built his own iPhone out of parts from the market.
Oh, okay. I vaguely remember.
Yeah,
Hearing about this,
actually, we interviewed him like 3 years ago, shortly before the pandemic, and we plan that he comes to Germany and makes a video on preserving of video games and machines and hardware and stuff. So
That's awesome.
So perhaps that is something we could work on together if you are interested. Because
yeah.
it's all about sharing the stuff,
Yeah, totally.
So right now I'm just waiting for the pandemic to get over and then to see what we can come up with. It actually grew a bit bigger because one of those people involved in preserving arcades who was working on a super gun, that is an adapter to connect arcade boards and read them and dump them and stuff. He actually died of cancer this year. So now I'm working on finding somebody to continue the project to help arcade machine preservation. So I'm trying to get the ties together of different people involved in different scenes, hardware scenes, retro gaming scenes, and see if we can get the project going on.
Yeah, I mean, there's that definitely sounds like a something to approach like MAME Team about if you haven't already done that. I don't know. There's a lot of people involved, and they all have sort of their own processes for that kind of stuff. But
I think MAME is not really into hardware development. They are basically emulating by software, at least from my understanding.
Oh, sorry, maybe I'm misunderstanding what you're trying to do.
Yeah. Well, we interviewed Valerio Canone, who is working with another guy from Belgium on an adapter to adapt arcade games and work on them, repairing them and so on. So actually, on the physical hardware, on the physical.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Themselves,
I thought you just meant dumping the software on the hardware.
Unfortunately, the hardware designer died of cancer.
Got it.
And so the project is still there, all the papers, all the diagrams, because the project leader got it rescued, but now he has nobody to have in-depth hardware info to continue that. And that's something that's really sad in this arcade business, that sometimes there are just like 2 or 3 people having in-depth info in a certain field.
That is most video game history, I feel like, is the expertise is very concentrated into a couple of people, and in a lot of cases, it's 1 or 2 people kind of keeping an entire project afloat. So yeah, that's a frustrating one for sure.
Exactly. Well, I see we could talk for another hour or 2. There are so many things to talk about.
Well, that's what the follow-up will be for.
If we didn't scare you too much.
Oh no, this was fun.
Right. Well, I'm glad you see it this way. Cool. Yeah. So what are your next steps, perhaps, to wrap this up? What is your next planning in the near future?
At the foundation?
Yes. Or on
a
personal level too, if you like.
Yeah, right now, what we're really working on is, like I said, the collection. We just hired our library director. He's been here literally 1 week as of today. So, it's not. We are just beginning this enormous project that is cataloging and making our collection accessible. But I mean, that's going to be a huge part of our projects this year. We're also in the process of getting our new office set up. We've moved, we've painted, all of that stuff. We are waiting on like the new library shelves to go in, and some of our archival storage to be delivered, and then kind of getting that all set up so that it's still a fairly small space, but it's now large enough where we can theoretically start taking like we can actually have researchers on site when that makes sense. Obviously, pandemic makes some of that still difficult right now, but we're excited to be in a space that's a little bit friendlier to on-site research. So those are the big things going on right now. I mean, there's always little projects that pop up throughout the year. There's a developer we get in touch with, and then work with their collection for a while, and I'm sure more stuff will come up every year. Stuff just kind of randomly comes up, so we can prepare like 80%, and then the last 20% is always going to be a surprise.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot for your time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
thanks for having me.
Have a good afternoon, I would say. For me, it's almost night here.
Oh,
It's only 4 o'clock here.
Yeah.
I'm on the West Coast. It's only 1 p.m. here.
Yeah,
So
you still got. Yeah,
You
you
still
got
got a
lots
whole
of time
day.
left.
Yep. All right, thanks, guys.
All right,
Thank you. Bye bye.
Take
Bye.
it easy, Kelsey.